we're going to set up a schedule. One key thing to note again is if you're logged out from being an admin, you're going to want to be logged in as well to get access to all of the dashboards that will allow you to get to creating a schedule. So in this case, we will come back here and we are going to enter the admin pin. Again, as a default, I set it up as 123456. And so now that we're logged in as administrator, what we have then is access to all of the dashboards that would get you to the point of actually, again, further controlling and configuring this device or devices that are connected to this device. So by here, we are going to tap onto the schedule configuration tab, and that brings you to the dashboard in which you can go through and actually create, edit, and or delete a schedule accordingly. So we're going to create a holiday schedule. So we tap the add here, and from here we get to enter in what name we want the schedule to be. Now, being as is that this is the first schedule that we create, I'm actually just going to call it schedule 1, or to abbreviate it, I'll just do sched, and I'm going to put the number value of 1, and that's going to be the name of this schedule. So in addition to that, I'm going to also schedule this particular schedule, normal schedule, to run during the weekdays. So I'll have it run in such a way that it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I'm going to disable Saturday and Sunday as well. Sorry, give me a second. And Sunday. If we go back, we can actually identify that those days have been specified based on what's back here. I can also choose what active days it is that I want this schedule to run on. And I'm fine with it running from January 1st to December 31st. Pretty much it's going to run forever during the weekdays. So that part is fine with me as well. So I'm going to go back, and now I get to configure the start and end trigger. So the start trigger is pretty much the identifier of what should take place when this schedule is executing during these days, and at what time those should be taking place as well. The end trigger is what should take place when the schedule comes to an end on the day in which these schedules are scheduled to be, and at what time that schedule should also come to an end during any specific day. So from here, we're going to set up the start trigger. So if we were to go in here, you have an option between setting it up as an astronomical timer or as a standard set time. In our case, we're going to actually have it be a set time, and we're going to have it be a case in which the schedule in itself is going to be running at 8 o'clock in the morning. So if we go back now, you will note that we've selected 8 o'clock in the morning. And so let's go back now, and now that we've set what time it is that the schedule should actually start at, we also need to determine what action should actually take place during such a schedule. And so we'll want to adjust the schedule such that it actually goes through and either turns on the light to a certain light level or turns off the lights to a certain light level as well. So under the set lights dashboard, one has the ability to expand that scope. So from here, I can choose to either control channels, or I can choose to control specific devices to move to a certain light level. I tend to prefer to drive it much more so by schedules, because then I can have multiple output devices tracking that channel, and they all adjust to the light level during the schedules. But if it is that one attempts to make the schedule much more so control specific products, then you can go under the output section or the output tab. One key thing to note is as you navigate across the channels tab and the outputs tab, you lose whatsoever configuration it is that you actually have set up. So you'll want to confirm that you really do want to go onto and specifically control outputs before you actually go through and navigate across that, or else whatsoever configuration you were doing or you may have been doing under channels will be lost as well. In this case, I just want to show you, and as you also observe, I have not made any configurations on the channels, so I'm going to go through and accept. And so by accepting, what you end up getting is actually a full list of all of the devices that are connected to this nDTC as well. In addition to that, if it's a relay panel, you also get a list of all of the relay panels that are connected. Now, one key thing to note as well is as you're looking at it, each one of the relays for the relay panel is appearing not really with an identifier. So the best path to identify what relay it is that may be controlled is we have a courtesy button here or an identify button here. that when you click on it, you will actually be triggering the relays to actually identify themselves. So they're going to be actually blinking, and I'm not sure if you can hear it, but the relay is actually blinking as it is displaying itself to be identified. So this would be the route in which you would be going about to configuring a specific device under a schedule for a start trigger. So if it is that you want to specifically control it, you can go through and enable it through the toggle button on the side, and at the same time as well, by adjusting this light level in the eye slider up here, you are selecting the light level that you want all of these outputs to be set to as well. So you do not have the ability to go through and only configure an individual output as much as it is that you configure all of the selected outputs simultaneously. Now this differs from channels, and so in this case, again, I wanted to drive this schedule much more so through control of channels instead of controls of individual devices, so I can go through and navigate under schedules. And one thing you'll note is there is still that master light slider there. But in addition to that, you also have it such that each and every one of the channels actually contain their own unique light levels or their unique sliders as well. So what I can then go and do is I can have it set that, you know what, at 8:30 in the morning, I actually want it to function, or 9 o'clock in the morning, or 8 o'clock in the morning. I actually want it to function that I want this channel to take the lights, and let's say I want them to be at more so 80% or 77%. I want channel 2 per se to go to, let's say 40%. And I can scroll down and I can configure each one of the channels. One key thing you should note is that before I went to adjust the light level, I made sure that those channels were enabled. By enabling these channels, you're saying that I want these channels and only these channels to be controlled by this particular schedule. And so that's what we did back here. And so I can come back here and I can potentially say I want to also control channel 3, and I just want channel 3 to be at 0%. So by that, during the time in which the start trigger hits or takes place, it is going to set channel 1 to 77%. All devices tracking channel 1 will go to 77%. It is also going to set channel 2 to 40%. Therefore, all devices tracking channel 2 will be set to 40%. And because I've enabled channel 3, but I've left it at 0%, it is actually going to make it that all devices who are tracking channel 3 will go to 0% as well. So I can go back now, and by going back, I also have the ability to then go about to selecting what switch devices I want to enable or disable. So this is for the case in which, let's say for example, it's the morning, and I do not want people to be able to go about to adjusting the light level in the space specifically by tapping of switches, turning lights on, turning lights off. If I'm a teacher, for example, and I want the lights on, I want them at 75%, but I don't want kids to come in and play around with the switches to turn them on and off, I can actually disable them from being able to do it directly through this enable disable switches dashboard. So from here, I've got all of the switches that are connected directly to this nDTC. And by then I can say, hey, this is a 4SDX. I don't want people to be able to adjust that. So I can come back here and choose disable, and during the time in which this trigger is going to be taking place, it is actually going to disable this 4SDX from it taking place. I can also go about to disabling, let's say, an NWSX, right? One key thing to note with the NWSX is it's got a switching as well as it's got sensing capabilities along with it. So if I was to come in here and disable it under the enable disable switches dashboard, one key thing to note is that it is not just going to disable the switching portion of the nDTC, it is going to disable the entire device. So if I was to come back here, you'll know that under enable disable sensors, it also shows that one device is being disabled back there. That device that is being disabled is the occupancy and photocell portion, the sensing portion of the nDTC or of the NWSX altogether. And as you go deeper, you'll note that it marks it as the NWSX is disabled as well. Let me go ahead and disable 101. So let's say 101 is the classroom number as well that's taking place. So I'm going to disable 101, and if you come back here now, it is telling you that, hey, we actually have one device or two devices, two switches disabled, and we have two sensors also disabled. That's great. Let's go with it. And if you were to look at it, under start trigger, we have a summary of what we just configured. we configured 3 channels to go to different light levels as part of the start trigger. That is to take place at 8 o'clock in the morning. We can do the same thing as well for the end trigger. So under end trigger, we come back here as well. You select what dedicated time it is that you'd like the end trigger to take place. And again, you can do it by a set time or through an astronomical timer, as in sunrise, sunset, as well with an offset as well. In our case, we want the end trigger to take place such that it is going to actually end at 5 o'clock p.m. So at 5 o'clock p.m., my expectation, if it is I'm in a classroom, all the kids to be out of the building, and I really want it so that the schedule in itself goes through and shuts the lights off and potentially leaves it out for sensors to drive more so the lighting in the space altogether. So I can go through and I'll set it up for 5 o'clock p.m. and as I go back, I have an actions option as well. So what actions is it that I want to happen as this schedule comes to an end? As a default, do nothing is the action. That means that whatever action it was that was taking place at 8 o'clock in the morning is going to continue to take place when this schedule comes to an end as well. But in our case, we don't exactly want that to be the case, so we can enter back here, and instead of selecting do nothing, we have the option to revert to default. That means to revert to each one of the device's default state. Whatsoever behavior it is that a device holds as its default, that is going to be what it means. At the same time as well, I can also choose to have them be set to a specific light level as well. So from here, I'm going to choose to have it be that they're set to a specific light level, and I'm actually going to choose the lights to all go to 0% or to turn off. So I can tap on the next icon, and from here I'm under the lights dashboard, and under the lights dashboard you'll note again that you've got all of the channels and they look exactly similar to the start trigger as well, or the lights dashboard for the start trigger. So under the start trigger, we know that we enable channel 1, channel 2 and channel 3, right? And we had set it such that channel 1 would go to 77% and channel 2 to go to 40%. In this case, because we want all the lights on, we can enable all of them and we can leave it at 0%, and that is going to make it that at 5 o'clock p.m. all of the lights are going to go 0%. So if we go back, now you'll see again that 3 sets have been set up, which represent the 3 channels that have been configured. Along that same line as well, we can go through and navigate across the enable disable tabs. And what you'll note now for the end trigger under the enable disable dashboard is that you actually have a tab that specifically lists the devices that have been changed by this schedule. So if you remember, as part of the start trigger, we had disabled the NWSX, and we also had disabled the 4SDX wall switch as well. So this tells you that, hey, these 2 devices have been modified as part of the start trigger, and this is them back here, and you get to choose now between not doing anything against what was done with the start trigger, or in our case, because the start trigger disabled them, let's just come back and say, hey, we want to enable them. At the same time as well, I want to also enable the NWSX, and so by making this enabled, now these are going to go back from being disabled to being enabled, and at the same time I can also choose to add functionalities or to enable disable any other devices along this line as well. In this case, because this is an end trigger, I don't really want to disable anything else. I'll leave it as is, and I'll go back. And one again thing to note is we only configured the switches, but by that, because the NWSX has occupancy and photostock capabilities as well, under the enable disable for sensors, it also displays as well that it's been modified. And so if you remember as well, we had modified the 101 sensor as well. So we'll want to come back to the 101 and we'll want to enable the 101 sensor as well. By pressing the back buttons, we can press it again, and what you'll get is a summary of all of the configurations that we were making as part of this particular actions for this end trigger. And if we go one more route, it is a summary of all that is going to be taking place during this end trigger. So we can confirm this, And by confirming this, we get back to the summary screen. So back here, we have created a schedule named Schedule 1 that is going to be running on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And it's going to be taking effect from January 1st until to December 31st. Pretty much it's going to be taking place every day of the calendar, every weekdays of the calendar. At the same time, its start trigger is going to begin at 8 o'clock in the morning, meaning the schedule is going to kick in at 8 o'clock in the morning during the weekdays, and it is going to control 3 channels, and it's going to end at 5 o'clock in the evening, and it is also going to control 3 channels. Now, identified as well as that number 2 is a notification that it is going to also do some configuration onto the actual end devices, some switches and potentially sensors as well on that same line for both the end trigger as well as the start trigger. Now, for spaces in which blink warning is required as a code, we also have that capability there. By enabling blink warning, what takes place is if it is that a schedule is set to actually, let's say the end trigger in this case is set to be at 5 p.m. and we've set it that at 5 p.m. we want all the lights to go off, what will take place with blink warning is that when we reach 4:55, the lights are actually going to turn off and they're going to turn back on, or they're going to display a blinking pattern. That's to notify individuals in the space that the lights are about to turn off. And so that gives users the ability to go through and tap onto a switch. And by tapping onto the switch, you are actually postponing the lights from turning off at 5 o'clock. And I believe our postponement is actually 2 hours, but it's configurable as well. So from here, you can choose to then go through and enable blink warning if it is a blink warning is required. And when you enable blink warning, we do get you to a notification in which we want you to confirm that you truly want to enable blink warning to take effect. At the same time as well, blink warning only takes effect on channel-based schedules. So if you're creating a schedule to configure or to control specifically output devices, blink warning is not going to work for those schedules. Your schedule has to be channel-based as well. Because we know that our schedule is channel-based, we can go through and confirm that, and by then we check this and oh crap, there is a misconfiguration. What's going on here? Well, it tells us that a blink warning was enabled. However, it must be configured to control channels. The start trigger must turn on lights and the end trigger must turn off lights. And if you were to recall as well that we had gone on to the start trigger, and in the start trigger we had enabled channel 3, but we had set channel 3 to be at light at 0%. For the case of here, our rule is that channel 3 cannot be at 0%. It has to go to a specific light level, or else there's no point in really selecting to enable channel 3. So let's adjust channel 3 and let's set it to 25%. And let's go back as well. We'll mark it down here and we'll mark it down here, and boom, we've created a schedule that is set to run at 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, if we were to come back to here as well, what you'll note is today is 9:14. Now, at 9:14, we still have an end trigger to take place to come to end the schedule or schedule 1. However, at the same time as well, we also had a start trigger on at 8 o'clock in the morning. So what you've got on the top is our schedules or triggers that have already taken effect on this date. And you also have the ability to see the triggers that are to be taking place as well on the bottom as well. A key thing to note is triggers that are much more so start triggers, they have that triangle indicator within them. Triggers that are end triggers actually happen to have more so of a square within it as well. And that allows you to be able to identify the difference between a start trigger and an end trigger.